If you want to edit multiple files in one single Illustrator document or file, you're going to need to use artboards. Artboards give you the ability to have multiple documents inside of one Illustrator file, and you can export those all out with a command called Export for Screens. Artboards have different properties, and I'm going to cover that. The reason why that I put multiple artboards in one file, it is when I have maybe, let's say, 9 different things that need to look the same, or I want to provide 9 different versions of a concept for a client, or to go ahead and to do and make or whatever else. I want them all together in a really nice package. What's great about artboards is you're able to pull from different parts of different libraries and keep everything together. So whether or not you're doing multiple pages of a document or you're doing multiple icons, artboards are your answer for using or manipulating multiple images inside of one Illustrator document. Let's jump into Illustrator, and I'm going to show you how to create artboards, how to manipulate objects, how to change the artboard name and the size of it, and then finally, how to export for screens and share that with whoever you need to. Let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do when you open up a file, you just go to File, New, and when you pop open the file, I'm going to choose a template. Illustrator comes with a bunch of awesome templates. Like I've demoed before, I'm going to choose Poster. It really doesn't matter what you start with for now. The whole point of this is you understand how artboards work and how you can export a bunch of things at one time after you manipulate them. I'm going to show you. The first thing that happens is this white space, this white rectangle is created. In this white rectangle, it's actually an artboard. I can move it around. I can recall it different things. It doesn't really matter what you do with it. Why the artboard is this specific size, it has to do with the outcome of what you're doing. Whether or not you're making an icon for a web page or a file for a laser cutter, you need to know what size that you're dealing with. The way that you know what size is the sizes are up here. The sizes are up here inside of the transform ribbon that is at the top. If this is not here, you need to go under Window, go to Workspace, and choose Essentials Classic to get going. When you're finally done and you have your own workspace, you can go under Workspace, and if you move things around, you can go to New Workspace and rename your workspace. I do this a lot if I add a panel. For instance, I added the Libraries panel to my desktop. The Libraries panel is going to give us the ability to bring in our base image for all of our different artboards. I'm going to go back and dock it. So now that I'm here, I have this artboards. What I really need to do is name the artboards. I can have hundreds of artboards inside of one Illustrator file. So I'm going to go under Window, and I'm going to select Artboards. Now I have this really cool panel, which I'm going to move around, and that will enable me to do the artboards and control them, change their name, and do lots of different things with them. I'm going to name this artboard Main Grid, okay? The reason why is this is the artboard that I'm going to be able to export a view of everything I'm working on, all the individual parts. Let's call this white space the parent, and we're going to create a bunch of little children boxes or artboards. So using the artboard tool on the left of the toolbar, this is your tools. These are your actual panels of art on your right, art tools that you would use. Your main bar, you can move that around closer to your work, or you can go back and dock it. I just moved it a little bit closer. Now, as you hover over each one of these tools, you get a little preview. You could turn this off if it's irritating you, but I'm keeping it on for demo purposes. I'm going to choose my artboard tool, and I'm going to draw an artboard over to the side. Okay, I'm going to hold down my shift key, and that's going to constrain it to a square, but I'm actually going to show you how to make it square another way. I'm going to do the best ability to click, drag, and create a square, and at the very top where it says this transform ribbon is, up here at the top, I want to go to 400, and I'm going to hit the tab key, and I'm going to go to the height of 400. And now I have a perfectly square artboard. If I choose my artboard tool, I can move it around, okay? I'm going to go under my artboard palette and I'm going to select the name, and it's automatically going to zoom into that artboard, and I'm going to call that icon 1. Okay, you'll understand. So I'm going to call it icon 1. Now I'm going to zoom back out. I'm on a trackpad, so I'm able to just use 2 of my fingers and zoom back out. But let's say that you wanted to, you're losing your space. I'm going to hold down my space bar to move my artboards around. You can use this magnifying tool. If you don't select option, it's going to zoom in. If you select option and click, it will zoom out. So now I have my main artboard, which is the grid one, and I have my individual artboard. So now what I'm going to do is bring in an image using that libraries panel that I talked to you about. So I'm going to drop down and select Adobe Stock. If you can't find this, stay at it, because it does take some manipulation to search for certain libraries. Make sure that you back all the way out and select my library. I'm going to search for Adobe Stock, which is fine. And then I'm going to hit robot icon. And now it's going to search my Adobe Stock library, and I'm going to grab a robot that I like. I'm going to drag the preview inside of my workspace. Once I have the preview inside of my workspace dragged from the stock image, I'm going to show you how to do an image trace. So I have this image here, and while I select it, there is a tool called Image Trace up here at the top. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to trace that image, and now I'm going to select Expand. I'm selecting the raster image, selecting Image Trace, then I'm selecting Expand, and now I'm going to choose what robot I want to put in my little area. I'm liking this guy. So I'm going to use my direct selection arrow tool, okay? That'll enable me to grab one part. Windows select just one part, and then I'm going to hit cut. And cut is going to separate it from the group. And now I'm going to paste it, Command V, and I'm going to move it up to my little area. I still have to remove this little line, so I'm going to do is grab that selection with the direct selection. The direct selection is your second pointer tool, your cursor tool, that will let you select individual parts. I am going to delete these other robots for now, but I'm not going to throw them away. I'm going to put them on a different layer. So in my layer palette, I want to create a new layer. So under layers, if you don't have layers open, go to Windows Layers. I'm going to select this little plus here, and I'm going to select a new layer. And I am going to cut these extra robots by Command X, and I'm going to paste them in another layer that I'm calling junk. And I'm going to edit, paste in front. Now they're in junk, and I'm going to turn off that layer. Okay, so now that layer's gone. So I can come back and grab another one if I want it. So now this little guy. I'm going to align this little robot, which I plan to duplicate 9 times, to the artboard. So under the Align tool, which is up here at the top, it's also available in a little panel on the right, so it's available 2 spaces. I'm going to do this drop down next to it, and I'm going to go to Align to Artboard. I'm going to roll over or hover over horizontal. I'm going to select the artboard, get into the artboard. I'm going to select my object. I'm now in this artboard, and I am going to make sure the whole object is selected, and I'm going to align this to the artboard. What I did there was interesting. So it doesn't know which artboard. So you have to make sure that you're in that artboard. Okay. If you're over here with your cursor and you go to align to artboard, it won't work. So select the object and align it vertically and horizontally, and make sure you have it toggled align to artboard. Okay. Now that that's done, I need the inside of this little graphic to be changed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see whether or not this robot has any white. And in fact, by dragging it over outside of the artboard, I see that this white exists. Now, I may need him for a new project, the actual white. So I'm going to drag a copy, a backup copy of this artboard over, of the robot over to the left. And I'm holding down my Option key. Now I'm going to select with my direct selection tool the inside and just delete the white inside. I'm going to select it until it's all gone. There we go. Now I have one version of the robot that has the fill and one that doesn't. So I'm going to move this robot back and I'm going to align it just like I did. And now I have my robot I can change. Now that I have this artboard perfectly done, notice that I created this artboard and the work outside of the main artboard. I'm going to drag it to the center of the main artboard that we created and renamed. The reason why that I kept The reason why I kept this second robot that had the fill, the white fill, is I want to use him in one of the 9 grids I'm going to create. So I want to duplicate this artboard 9 times. Now, with the artboard tool right here at the bottom of the toolboard palette, when you select inside of an artboard, you can move all of the contents of anything that's inside of that artboard or artboards that are inside of that artboard. Yep. You could move everything. But when I select the artboard, if I get lost and I don't know what to select, go ahead and select an arrow tool or hit your escape key. I'm going to select the artboard tool, and in this individual artboard, the first icon, I had to select the name, the little blue area at the top, okay? Sometimes if you're trying to figure out where to select the actual place, the name of the artboard. So I'm going to select that artboard, and I'm going to drag it over to the right. As I drag it to the right, there might be snapping on. That's okay. If there's not snapping, you're going to need to hold the shift key. But in this situation, it's snapping nicely. So I'm just going to hold my Option key down and I'm going to drag a copy. Now I'm going to drag one more copy over and now I have 3. I'm going to worry about this outside artboard and how it all looks in a second. So I'm going to keep dragging and I'm holding down the Option key and I'm dragging it from the name, holding the Option key, and I'm leaving different copies. So what I have here is I'm creating a matrix or a grid of these robots that I can edit and I can export. Oops, I accidentally created an artboard, but I just hit undo. So I'm going to grab this or select the artboard, hold my Option key down and drag over. Select the name of the artboard. Now I'm going to drag it over holding the Option key. And now I have my grid. So I want this outside grid can contain all of these robots really nicely. So I'm going to select that artboard by selecting in the white area, and then I'm going to move the lines around and I'm going to contain this artboard. So I have this beautiful grid. So now what I have this extra little guy over to the side. We're going to worry about him in a second. I have 9 artboards that are in an artboard. So if I look at my artboard palette over here, my artboard panel, I see that I have my main grid, which is the final image that shows all of them. And then I have all 9 of them. So now I'm going to rename them. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this main artboard all the way down to the bottom. That makes it number 10. So the icon 1 I already named. And here I'm going to double click the name and I'm going to call this icon 2. And what I'm doing is I'm actually creating the names of these files the way that they're going to be exported. So, oops, I accidentally called it icon 3. So I'm now just going to name it. And as you select the artboard, it zooms into the artboard. So I'm going through each one of these, renaming them. Every time I select the artboard, it's going to actually zoom into that. So this is icon 5. And this is double clicking the name. This is icon 6. Double clicking the name, icon 7. Oops, I misspelled that. That's okay. Times are tough. Icon 8. Remember, the reason why you're seeing the screen change is every time I select that artboard, it thinks that I want to work on it. And then icon 9. 9. So now I have them all nicely named. I'm going to go ahead and save that, and then I'm going to zoom back out. The way that I'm zooming back out is using my trackpad, but you can use the magnifying glass also. Now I'm going to edit each one of these different robots using different properties, and then we're going to export everything up and compress that folder. So these icons, just for this demo, or these little robots, I'm going to use a couple of the design fundamentals, the 5 of them that I've talked about in the past. That would be a line, it would be a shape, it would be a form, or it would be a texture, or it would be balance. And that's really what I'm going to be doing. It's just for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to be adding different properties to each one of these icons. So what's really great about it is that now that I have them all identical and they're all lined up, I can just have fun with this. For the first one I want to do is a line. I just want to make it a line. Like, I want to point out the fact that it's just built with lines. So right now it has a fill on it and it looks like lines, but it's really not a line. So if you see me zooming in, the way that I'm zooming in is with a magnifying glass or the trackpad. So for this one here, I'm going to go ahead, and it has a fill of black because I can see the black right here. I'm going to use this little swap, fill, and stroke. And so now there has a stroke weight over here, and at the top it's 1 point. I usually like to use either 1 point, 2 point, or 3 point stroke. So I'm going to make it 3. And so now that I have it aligned, I'm kind of done with that little guy. Now I'm going to move into this one, and I want him to be a different color. So now I want to make one of these little robot guys a different color. So I'm going to use my swatches library, which is over here. I'm just going to drag it next to me. Sometimes I move my panels over to my artwork and then I put them back. And then I'm going to change the color. So now I have a red, I can choose orange. If I want to load a new color palette, I can use the hamburger, which is the 3 lines on every panel. And I want to open swatch library, and I'm going to choose nature, and I'm going to choose landscape. And so now I have some really cool little colors that I didn't have before. I'm just going to toggle them back down onto my swatches. Now I can choose really unique colors from there. And so that's one of the ways that you can get more unique colors. So now for this guy, I want him to be the form. So for that situation, I want to go to my other little robot that I had here in the backup, and I wanted to use the fill color. This guy, remember, did not have a fill color. So for now, I'm just going to delete this little guy, and I'm going to drag a copy of this robot in and hold down the Option key. So he was in reserve, so I could, if I needed to do a fill. Let me give you an example. The second arrow tool, which is the direct selection tool, I'm going to select in the inside, and you can see that white comes up in the fill. I'm going to choose to do a color like this, and now that fills it in. But let's say I wanted to make it look like a form, which is a 3-dimensional object. I would like to use a gradient. So I'm going to start with the default gradient, which is right here. Now this is probably the most complicated part, but I'm going to be really quick about it. So these little ears need to be a form too. So I'm going to choose that little gradient. And I'm going to select all 3 of those objects except the eyes. Now I want to edit this gradient so that it looks different. It looks like the light source is coming from one direction going into a shadow. So under Window, I'm going to go and bring up the gradient panel. With the gradient panel available, I'm now able to edit this gradient. So I still have my robot part selected. That's just the inside of the robot. I'm now going to choose this gradient, which I took from the default swatches, and I'm going to make it radial. And then what I'm going to do is select my gradient tool, which is in the left toolbar, and I'm going to click drag the light source and move it there. Let me undo and do it one more time. Once I make the inside of my shape or my object or my icon a gradient, I want to click drag and I want to move it and adjust where the light comes. So if you look at this gradient right here, this gradient tool, what the gradient tool does, it takes the gradient and it moves it from white to dark. But I can control where it goes by dragging this little tool around. Okay? There's something in another advanced video I'm going to go into is a mesh. You can actually make a really cool mesh now inside of it, but this really qualifies for the form. One other thing I need for this to be a form is a shadow. Look like it's hovering off the ground. The way that I'm going to create the shadow is, in this case, I'm going to use a little tiny little black box and I'm going to fill it with black. So I'm going to fill it with black. Now I want to blur it because a shadow is blurred and it's transparent to a degree. So under Effect, I'm going to go to Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to move my little window, tool setting window around so I can see it. And in fact, it's there. I can change the radius. If I hit Preview on or off, I can make a little shadow underneath. So now I have my shadow underneath, but I want it to be behind the robot or make the robot looks like he's hovering. So I'm going to select the shadow and under, I think it's Object, I'm going to go to Arrange, Send to Back. And that puts the little shadow down below. I'm going to make a little bit smaller. And there is the shadow for that robot there. So now I have the form. So let's move on. So let's say that I wanted to make this robot look a little bit different and I wanted to make it double the size, but I didn't want it to go outside of the icon. What I want to do in that situation is add a mask. So the first thing I'm going to do is make the robot bigger. Okay. Now the robot's bigger. I want to put a box over the robot that will mask only parts of the robot. So for the square, I'm putting the square over this robot and I'm selecting both, and under Object, Clipping Mask, I'm hiding part of the robot. Now you can edit that by double clicking it and go in and move the robot within the mask. Isn't that cool? So I'm going to go outside of this group. You can see the hierarchy at the group up at the top. I'm going to back up using the arrow keys. Now I'm done with that. I have a line, I have color, I have a form, and I went ahead and I cropped this out and created a different design. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a really unique looking robot by changing the robot size and making it balanced. So right now there's only one robot inside of this particular artboard. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is my 5th artboard. I'm going to click and drag and just around after I selected it and scale it down, and I'm able to constrain it using my Shift key. I'm going to grab one robot there. I'm going to drag them down. And I'm going to move another one. And I'm going to make this one a little bit bigger. This guy a little bit bigger. So now I'm going to create 2 more robots over here. What I'm doing is the balance thing. So I'm going to grab this robot and put him up here at the top. And I'm going to drag this little guy and put him down at the bottom. So now I have that done. So you would say, is that balanced? Let me go ahead and add a line down the center. I'm just choosing my pen tool and I'm moving a little line. The line will kind of show where each of those things is split up into the gradient. But now I want to make each one of these robots a little bit smaller. So I'm going to shift select them and then move the robots around. Now, you don't have to do this exactly the way I'm doing it. I'm just trying to show you I'm creating different images in these grids so I can create different versions of it. Now for this guy here, all I want to do is change its color. So I'm going to select it. You can see the fill is black, and I'm going to select orange. I don't like orange. I'm going to go ahead and select green, and then I'm going to add a drop shadow. So under Effect, Stylize, well, let's go up here at Stylize. I'm going to show drop shadow. So again, Effect, Stylize, drop shadow. Now I'm going to move that away, and you can see I have a beautiful drop shadow, and I can change the distance, its offset, and everything right here. I can turn the preview on or off. And so now I have a cool little drop shadow. For this guy, I'm going to show you how to change the transparency. So this is 6-7. So I'm going to add a color. Let's say we're going to do red. And I want a cooler color from the nature stuff. So I'm going to choose, let's choose this nice little purple. So in this situation here, I'm going to change the opacity. So I selected the object, obviously changed it to a version of purple, and up at the top, I'm going to change the opacity or transparency and lower it down to 50%. And now that gets me my 50%. So I've changed each of these in different ways. Now's a good time to save my file. Now, for these last two, I'm going to do something unique for the 9th one here, but I want to add a texture. So I did grab the robot that had the fill. So if you look here quickly, I have the fill on him. I can change different colors and stuff like that. Okay. So in order to add a texture, I want to create a clipping mask, very similar to how I created a clipping mask here. So I'm going to hit undo to get rid of the red. And now I'm going to create my own texture. So I'm going to grab the circle tool. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to draw a little circle. And I'm going to fill the circle with black. And I am going to take this black. Now you could just go grab a texture from something else or change the texture or use a shape in Illustrator, but I'm just showing you what I'm going to quickly do to teach you a few other things. So to create a little circle texture pattern, I'm going to select the circle I created, hold my Shift key down, and hold my Option key down, and move the circle and copy it. Then I'm going to hit Command D, which duplicates it. Now I have a bunch of circles. Okay, again, what that was, I created a little circle. Okay, I created a little circle. I then dragged the circle over to my left, held down my Option key, and left the copy. Then to duplicate my last procedure, I'm going to hit Command D and I'm going to duplicate it all. So now I'm going to grab all of these and do the same thing with that. I selected the entire row of circles, moved it down, held my Option key down. Now I'm going to hit Command D to duplicate it. So now I have a really cool circle texture. I'm going to make it a little opaque, or I'm going to make it transparent. And I'm going to drop this down and I'm going to group all of these together. Okay, so if I'm going too fast, you can rewind. So now I have this really cool pattern here. I can make the pattern smaller or whatnot. So let's say I want just the texture to show up inside of the robot. I'm going to send this texture to the back. Object, arrange, send to back. Now it's filled. So what do I do now? How do I get the texture to be seen? Because I have a white robot over this. I want to create a clipping mask. So first thing I'm going to do is delete the inside of the robot, the white area. Okay. So since this is a vector, I can select it by using the direct selection tool, select the white, and then delete the center of the robot. So now I can see that through my ears and through the parts of the robot, the texture is coming through, but I don't want it to be on the outside. So I want to create a clipping mask. So I'm going to select my object. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste it. And now I can work on creating a mask. So down here at the bottom, I'm going to select my entire object, and I want the inside parts to be gone. Now, there is a tool and it's called Pathfinder, that we can try to make this happen. And if this doesn't happen, I'm going to show you what it needs to work. So what we need to do is group everything together. I want one solid block to be my transparency. So I'm going to unite all of these shapes together. And that didn't happen. It wasn't able to unite. The second thing we can do is go under Object, Compound Path, Object, Compound Path with the robot selected, and hit Release. Oh, that did it. It released all of those paths. A compound path is two or more paths that create it. A donut or a ring is a really good example of a compound path. Now I'm going to use this unite thing, and I have my perfect outline of my robot. So now I'm going to drag my robot back over my mask, over this object, right? And I'm going to select the I have the outside selected. I'm going to select the texture, Shift, select it. So now I have both my texture and the outside selected, and I'm going to go to Object, Clipping Mask, Make. And now my texture is inside of my object. Now what I'm going to do is, for the last final thing, I'm just going to do something extremely interesting. I'm going to add some different eyeballs to it. I'm going to make him a little silly little guy. So I'm going to add that. I am going to add a smiley face to him instead of just this little frown. I'm going to click, drag a shape, going to change it from the fill to the stroke, and I'm going to up the stroke. Once I select the stroke, it's going to give me up here at the top the ability to change the stroke. Under stroke, I can change the end caps to make them round. And now I have this little funny little smile on this guy. So now I've done all of these 9. I'm going to delete that little extra guy. And now I have my matrix of different little characters. I'm going to save it. And what's great about this, I'm going to move all of my swatches back. What's great about this is that I can export each individually now, and I can export them all. So I like to keep my desktop nice and clean. So I'm going to move all of my little panels back to where they belong, except I'm going to leave out my artboard. Now, the final thing I want to do, there's this line. I want to make this line a little bit better. I'm going to thicken that line up. And then I'm going to change the end caps. That's good. So now I have something that I just really like. I think maybe I can move this line over a little bit, but it's a cool little thing. I got my form. Could be better, but this will get it done. Now what we want to do to export, and we want to go to File, Export for Screens. Now, all of my images are individually. I use this a lot, are individual. I can select them all up here at the top. I select all. I can choose what type of file I want to export. I'm going to export JPEGs at this point. And then I choose what folder that I want them to go into. Okay. I want to choose what folder. And then I can also choose the scale. So let's say you do need different scales for different things like web, or for desktop publishing like a book. You can choose the actual scales, and you can do multiple versions of the scales. So I'm going to do 1 times, and then I'm going to export that, and that's going to create a folder, automatically pop open the folder, and I am going to select that file, and I'm going to call it Artboard Demo, Artboard Demo, and then I'm going to right click and then compress those images. Compress those images. Oh, wait. Yeah, you know what I mean. Okay, let me go back to Illustrator and show you one thing. So let's say that you're doing this for like a laser cutter or something else. Let's say you want an SVG file. Under File, Export for Screens, you want to choose SVG at the bottom. That stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. That gives people the ability to edit it. But it's what all these machines and things use. You can now use scalable SVGs on web, so they can scale them up. So in this situation, there is no scale because they're actually scaled individually by a website. So when you export those, you will export them just as SVGs. Okay, it'll put them in a folder called SVGs. But there's options. Over to the right, you can have options of each one of these files. I'm going to select SVG, but I'm going to make sure that responsive is not selected. Sometimes making that happen can really screw up the SVG. So make sure you understand that. So now when I hit export, it creates a folder of SVGs. I can right click that and I can hit compress, and I can send that to whoever needs it or to wherever I need to go. So that concludes making 10 different So that concludes making artboards and how to export them. So if I went too fast, make sure you rewind and watch. Whenever you do, make something that connects someone. Peace out.